And until people really get rid of the private central banking system, every other topic you mention, it's pointless even to mention them in a sense. You have to cut off the head of the snake to stop it having the power over the whole of the body. And really that's where the whole thing is power is in money. And those boys who control the money control Congress and everything else to do with it. And all the politicians who are simply bought off and placed in power. And talking of them too, I was thinking about the degradation of society that was all part of this big system. And I've talked before about Bezmenov, who came over from basically he was stationed from Russia in India at the time, and he managed to wangle his way over to Canada. He got a job at the CBC where he said that he'd never met so many communists as he had in the CBC. And that's obvious for if you ever try and watch their programming without your hair turning grey. But anyway, he said the same thing. He said that in the 70s the KGB was so surprised and delighted that the contamination, the moral decay had taken on so well within the United States and elsewhere. And that, of course, was, from the 60s onwards when they were pushing the liberalism, they called it, through the school. And we find that Khrushchev and others actually called liberalism just the American version of communism. But it also meant the relaxation and the destruction of all that was before, all the previous rules. And free sex has always been at the top of the tree, because you cannot conquer society until the society cannot stand together as a society with a unified culture. It's easy pickings, and once you start breaking it up, and you find that the moral decay sets in. And then, of course, the next push is for single mothers. And then you find most women don't want children at all now. So there's been very, very successful in what they wanted to accomplish. This is all discussed, remember, in the books in communism, and you can pick them up, used very, very cheap today, about the various parts of this big takeover of the West. They said that the West would fall without firing a shot from within, and they're pretty well right on that. Because even the ancients, the philosophers in Greece and elsewhere, knew that a culture that was completely and utterly immoral is a normal way to be, and it's the new normal now. You see, it's normalized. This is contamination, as it's called. It's normalized. And people don't realize that they are products of a process of demoralization and contamination. Maybe 3 generations have lived through this. And each generation makes it easier for the next one to go further and further and further, which is exactly the way it was always planned. Until you end up in the middle of a world at war. This is a world war going on. You've had a world war going on really continuously since at least the Gulf War I, I'd say, and the entire Middle East and all the NATO countries involved. That's what you call a world war, for those who don't realize what you're going through. And it never stopped with Gulf War I. Every president, including Clinton, sent cruise missile after cruise missile over into Iraq pretty well every day. And the U.S. taxpayer picked up the tab to replace all those cruise missiles and get fresh new painted ones. It's a great business, the disposable income really, as these things go pop and you immediately order a new one. But contamination, as I say, is now the norm. And it reminds me of Brave New World, exactly what Huxley knew in Brave New World, and his other book, Brave New World Revisited, where he explains where the novel could actually be made to come true with the use of science and psychology and cultural control. And that's what we've been living through for an awful long time. So he knew it all back then, and he should do, because his family were related to the Darwins, and they were up in all the big global meetings of his day. And they knew eventually they'd destroy all that had kept people together and fought off. You see, if you're not unified, you can't fight off enemies of any kind whatsoever. And even on a personal level sometimes. So you must deculturalize, demoralize, and eventually you'll get to your goal of literally breeding the type of citizens you want, if you need many at all. And of course you won't need that many for this brave new world that they've been talking about for so long. And now we're at the stage, we've been living through it for years, where politicians at one time used to just step down when they were caught or found in disgrace, as it was called. Because after all, if they can't if they're going to take a position of responsibility and uphold a tradition, you see, you got to understand traditions are awfully important. When you start throwing traditions out the window, then anything goes, and you will have no morality or integrity at the top either. And of course, I can remember when Clinton had his little dalliance, which the press made sure we all knew about. And to be honest with you, I think that really was a trial balloon, because they could have got him on so many other women before that, but they kept it quiet for years. The Secret Service were basically cleaning up all these messes that they left behind them. So when they gave you Monica Lewinsky, it was like a soap opera, and it was presented like a soap opera. And I knew then this was a trial balloon. I says, he's probably going to be more popular, especially amongst the women, after this than before. And sure enough, that's what came in the various polls. So you're trained, you're constantly being trained, and you don't know it. Isolated incidents are not so isolated after all. And they kind of come out on cue. Because believe you me, if they want to cover things up at the top, you'll never ever hear about them. They're awfully good at covering up at the top. And I was looking at this article today with this representative from New York, and it said that even the way it's worded in the newspaper, it says, should Representative Anthony Weiner resign after sexting? They call it sexting. Get fed up with these terms, revelations. So should he resign? So it's almost like a question to the public, isn't it? And that's how they put it to you. Then a little paragraph really. It says, earlier this year, Representative Chris Lee, a married Republican from New York, resigned within hours after it was revealed he sent a topless photograph of himself to a woman he met on Craigslist. Now Representative Anthony Weiner, a Democrat from New York, has revealed he sexted with multiple women over the course of the last several years. He also lied about a photograph which was released last week, saying his Twitter account had been hacked. So he's a liar as well, you see. And instead, he now admits it was a photograph of him and that he sent it to the recipient. So I guess Weiner was showing his weenie to somebody. So this is the kind of stuff that they're giving you. And then it says at the bottom, what do you think? Can Representative Weiner's career recover from this episode? He's apparently not broken any laws. This is a behavior relevant to his role in public service. Well, yeah, if he's a liar, you see, it definitely is relevant to his role in public service. And if he's standing up there, again, trying to appear impeccable in his manners or his behavior or the charade that he has around him, and he's actually doing this kind of stuff, well, can you really trust a guy like that on anything whatsoever? He's out for himself, obviously. You understand, if you get up into any position of authority, you're on a platform then, and you've got to watch yourself. You've got to watch yourself. And this character is doing, I guess, what a lot of them probably do. They don't care anymore. They know society's kaput. Just look at all the stuff they watch on TV. The children are taught amazing stuff now as well in school. All kinds of stuff. So, again, I've said many times, pedophilia will go out the window one day, not too long in the future, as they go to town on all this kind of stuff. And marriage itself is just a plummet. It's just about 2 inches to hit the ground now, I think. And that's it gone. So it's been awfully successful, because if you want to conquer any peoples at all who once were very strong and they don't realize it, that they're so stupid. People are so stupid, they don't realize that it was their culture that kept them strong. It was their culture that gave them the zest and the fight. When that's gone, you're anybody's. You're on the target list, and you're easy prey. People should really, really remember that. And then you just look through today's news again, and then you get this one here. Delaware pediatrician, a doctor who looks after children, goes on trial for alleged sex abuse. And I'll talk about this when I come back. Over 103 children, some as young as 2. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, we're back in Cutting Through the Matrix, talking about the culture and how society has been totally contaminated, as the KGB used to call it, culturally, morally, and every other way too, which again, remember, was a part of the whole Communist Manifesto, was destruction of the family unit, and on and on it went. So, I'm talking about how as they progress in this wonderful progression, they call this the society, the civilization progressive, you see, and you got to always wonder where it's supposed to go, this progression, and I know where it's supposed to go. I've read all their books. And when they talk about civilization and progress, they're actually talking about this big agenda. And they always have been for 200 or 300 years, actually. And eventually we'll all be chipped and brain dead, hopefully. You know, to read this rotten news, we won't have to read any more bad news again. And then we'll all be quite happy because we won't know any better. But until then, we've got to go through this system here. As I say, they make the omelette and break the eggs to make the new system and beard the broken eggshells. So, as I say, here's a Delaware pediatrician goes on trial for alleged sex abuse. You can't watch a movie anywhere now without it in it. It's got to have sex in it. It just has to be there, you know, just standard. And children are all watching this stuff, and they're encouraged in school as well to do all this stuff. There's one company now, I don't even know if it was Canada or somewhere else, who was pulling in young children before their puberty to ask them to make sure of their gender in case they want a sex change. I'm not kidding you. This is how stupid and ridiculous everything is now, but it's a purpose behind it. It's not willy-nilly and just occasional group here and there that's pushing for this stuff. Anyway, it says, a judge heard evidence Tuesday at the one-day bench trial of a Delaware pediatrician accused of molesting 103 of his patients, some of them 5 years old or younger. Judge William C. Carpenter hearing the case of Earl Bradley, 58 years old. And this is the thing too about perverts. They never slow down all through their lives until they die. It's weird. It's really weird, you know, because it's a power thing too. Anyway, advised attorneys he will issue his verdict later, the court officials said. Bradley, whose practice was in Lewis, went into the trial facing 529 counts of rape, sexual exploitation of children, unlawful sexual contact, and other charges. So I guess he made a deal and brought it down to 103. 529. Huh? And it says, prosecutors filed an amendment indictment on Tuesday condensing the charges against Bradley in 24 counts. There were no new victims or incidents alleged in the new indictment. No, they wouldn't. They'd rule them out as part of the deal. The charges accused Bradley of first-degree rape, forcing girls to perform oral sex on him, and filming dozens of children engaging in sexual acts. Bradley waived his right to a jury trial and was tried before Carpenter, according to the court officials in Georgetown, Delaware. So, it says police officers and detectives, but not any of the alleged victims testified Tuesday. You understand the court systems now, they all make their little deals and all the rest of it. And often even the people who are victims can't get a word in at all. They're not allowed to speak whatsoever, or their parent or parents if they have to, lucky enough to have to these days. But, it just shows you how far it's all gone. Everything's going off in its own little system now. Well, this is our system. This is the law system, you see. And there's a policy now to do it this way. Yeah. Evidence is based on videos seized from Bradley's home and office, the Delaware Attorney General Bo Biden has said. In April, Carpenter ruled against a defense motion to suppress. Public defenders challenged the scope of a search warrant used to acquire videotape evidence from two buildings. I mean, this guy's been in a big pedophile ring, obviously. And there'll be some big names involved, as always. And you'd be surprised, you know. Or maybe you would be surprised now, I don't know. But this is, again, all symptomatic of a decaying civilization, the type that Professor Carol Quigley talks about on how empires and nations rise and they get to this stage and then all this stuff happens. It's a formula, you understand. And then it falls apart from within. And then there's a lot of brutality, especially on the part of the state. If the state ever wants you to be defenseless, they destroy the culture first. You understand? That's what they do. And then no one will stand up for anyone else. So it's a formula. Remember, it's a formula. And so you must bring out the same formula to get the same results when you're changing into a new order, or a new world order as is now. And then Then you look at this article that came into, be prepared for equality. The Scouts look to recruit more homosexual leaders and members. I wonder if they phrased that right, members. Anyway, I guess they're lost in the woods now. They've lost their way. They've no compass whatsoever. That skips past your eyes. And then you look into this article here. It's from 2010. It's quite good, actually. It says Peter Tatchell and the Paedophile Book. I mentioned that at the time, I think, on one of the talks I gave. It says it was the start of a liberated sexual new dawn. The era of why not. Archaic laws restricting sexual practices and relationships were going to be swept away. That was a big cry in 60s, 70s. No one was to say who should do sexual things with whoever or how. Sexual liberation had become, for some reason, very important reason, a vital part of true socialism. If adults consented, then hey, why should the church or the government or assorted boring old fuddy-duddies say no to them? And for that matter, if children wanted sex lives, or if adult homosexual men wanted sex lives with children, then that was all part and parcel of the glorious sexual revolution. And I'll continue with this when I get back from these messages.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
Hi, we're back, cutting through the matrix and talking about how we've all really been contaminated. The whole system's been contaminated, and people don't realize it because it's now normal. It's now normal. Anything can be made normal. Anything at all. Remember that. Anything can be made normal. And in culture. And it goes on to say this article here about this particular book. It came out. It says, talking about sexual liberation and all the rest of it. And it says, or so it seemed in 1986 when the most extraordinary book of the decade, The Betrayal of Youth, it's called, was published by CL Publications in London with the subtitle Radical Perspectives on Childhood Sexuality, Intergenerational Sex, which is pedophilia, they prefer the other term, and the Social Oppression of Children and Young People. It says The Betrayal of Youth was edited by none less than Warren Middleton, alias John Parrott, the then Vice Chairman of the Paedophile Information Exchange, Britain's foremost paedophile advocacy and aficionado support group. They did indeed have a lot of vice to be chairperson of. It says, a campaigning book. In a preface, Middleton acknowledged the help or support of Dr. Ken Plummer of Essex University, Dr. Brian Taylor of Sussex, Mr. John Hart of Sheffield that's Polytechnic, I guess, and Chris and Jane Hobbs. His mother and father, homosexual activist Jeffrey Weeks, Nettie Pollard of the National Campaign for Civil Liberty, now called Just Liberty, assorted activists and feminists, and a large number of PIE Executive Committee members. So it's the bigwigs at the top that are pushing it. I always tell you that nothing comes from the bottom upwards. It's from the top down. Any cultural change that's actually advocated, it's authorized. The book was part of a campaign to abolish all ages of consent, destroy the responsibilities of parents for their children, deny any ill effects on children of interference by pedophiles, and withal to make it easier for pedophiles to gain sexual access to children. A host of weird, sex-obsessed nutcases contributed at Middleton's invitation. Among them was militant feminist Beatrice Faust. Another was editor of the Sex Maniac's Diary, Tuppy Owens. In fact, she wrote a chapter with Tom O'Carroll, convicted of corrupting public morals earlier by sending out a list of paedophile contacts. Labour activist Eric Presland, playwright and leading light in the Organisation for Lesbian and Gay Action, contributed to the betrayal of youth. His article was a routine denunciation of the power that adult society has over children, prefaced by a first-person account of sexual activity with children. Mr. Presland related his first paedophile experience with an Asian boy of 13 and boasted of interference with a little boy of 6. And I'll put all these links up actually tonight on the website for you to look for yourself. And it also has pages from the book on this website too. There's links to pages from it, so you can look at if any of you really care anymore. I mean, I don't know if folk even care anymore about this stuff, because they're getting. Just look at the side of all the newspaper articles you bring up on your computer. Just all the other stories down your right hand side. Just look at them all, and look at the doses you've been fed in your lifetime, regardless of how old you are. It's all over the place, this kind of stuff. Deculturalization, demoralization, total contamination. Then nothing can stand. Then government loves it too, socialist government. Oh, they can't take care of their children anymore. We better take care of them. The state will take care of the children. Give me your children. You know, it was Lenin said the same thing. He says, initially we'll start off, he said agencies like child care protection. That's what he's talking about. And healthcare too, by the way. And even police. Because really, you hire the cops. He says, we'll start them off as services to the public. And eventually they'll become authorities over the public. How did he know all this was going to happen with such certainty? Eh? Very old plan, this. Very old plan. And all the bigwigs and the bankers too were all in on it. The real government, the world government's been here for a long time, only previously it was waging total war across the world on every culture. And then there's another one too from a French politician who was off to orgies in Morocco, little boys' orgies. And I'll put that link up as well, and that'll tie that lot together. That's just a few from today. It's not a lot, actually. I could go on forever. But anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that when you're deculturalized, demoralized, and contaminated, you can't stand together on anything. And even amongst the patriot community, it'll be just like the Spanish Civil War, where the anarchists and the communists and the Trotskyists and all the various other groups are all fighting each other rather than standing together. You don't realize, you see, there's a lot of contamination out there. The first thing you'll hear is special rights for this group or that group or whatever. That's the first thing you'll hear. Yep. They're already contaminated. And personally, I don't think you can save a society like that. I really don't. And so did the ancients too. They should know, because they had histories of even more ancient times. Probably better and truer histories than we get today. So I'll take Carlton from New York if he's on the line.
Hey, Mr. White, how you doing?
Not too bad.
You was touching on breakdown of culture, basically the family unit, and today I just, for some reason, just happened to read on the Willie Lynch letter, The Making of a Slave. I know you probably heard of that.
Yeah.
And of course it's easy for me to kind of grasp what you're talking about, because I was raised on black history.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to read like a small part from that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I'll substitute kind of like the more politically correct speech, but we breed 2 Negro males with 2 Negro females. Then we take the Negro male away from them and keep them moving and working. Say one Negro female bears a Negro female and the other bears a Negro male, both Negro females being without influence of the Negro male, image frozen with an independent psychology. I want to underline that. Will raise their offspring into reverse positions. The one with the female offspring will teach her to be like herself, independent and negotiable. The one with the Negro male offspring, she being frozen, subconscious, fear for his life, will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically strong. In other words, body over mind. Now, in a few years, when these 2 offspring become fertile for early reproduction, we will mate and breed them and continue the cycle. That is good, sound, and long-range comprehensive planning. And honestly, that's just like a micro of the macrocosm. So,
yeah, it is. You understand that they've done that across the whole world now? Because Plato, they all quote Plato in his book, The Republic. And Plato said eventually we'd like all the women to be held in common, right? That meant that there's a free-for-all, that they wouldn't mate with anybody or stick with anybody. All women would be available to all men, but there'd be no bonding whatsoever. But then, of course, when you radicalize them too with the ultra-feminist charge that they've had, They've got the exact same thing happening where guys are almost whimpering to the women today. And the women are making all the decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. But I ain't gonna keep you on the line. Just go ahead and do your thing, man. Keep teaching. I'll keep learning.
Thanks for calling. But that's the way it's done. There's many ways to accomplish the same goal. And of course, massive psychology is in on it now.